What's going on, my homies? Jolt here from TheTokenMinorities, and I am back with the Week 4 Team Builder of GBA Season 9, where your KC Jirachiefs are taking on Old Man Tup, the coach of the Pittsburgh Pirattatas. Make sure to go check out Tup. He's going to be linked down in the description below. He's been showing a lot of improvement this season. He has a 2-1 record already at this point, picking up wins against a couple quality opponents in MV and I believe the other was Goldoa. So those are very solid wins, honestly. So, Tup is no one to sleep on here in this week. But make sure to go check him out. Check out his team builder if he uploads one. Obviously, make sure to check out his side of our match as well, which will be coming up tomorrow as per the usual. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive right on into the team for this week, or I guess the team match to start things off. So Tup this season is rocking a terrifying team. He has the Shaman Sky, Zeraora, Melodic, Mega Scizor, Greninja, which is Battle Bond Greninja, Ash Greninja, Latias, Miltank, Togekiss, Entei, Diggersby, and Claydol, with the Zeraora and the Latias being his Z captain. So he has a lot of really scary offense on his team. He has some really fast Pokemon as well, which is going to be really annoying to deal with offensively, just because they're able to outspeed the vast majority of my team, really the entirety of my team, without like Choice Scarfs or a speed boost from Scolipede. So stuff like the Shaman Sky, the Battle Bond Greninja, if he's able to get his Battle Bond up, or even if he's not, Greninja's still a fast, annoying threat. Then he also has the Zeraora, which is the fastest mon on his team and outspeeds the entirety of my team as well. So, he has some really scary Pokemon. Sorry, that's not actually true. I have a Mega Aerodactyl. Mega Aerodactyl outspeeds all of that. That's definitely nice. But aside from Mega Aerodactyl, yeah, his mons pretty much, or those mons at least, outspeed the rest of my team. So that's something I'll have to be really careful about defensively. I can't really check them offensively unless I'm doing it with my Mega Aerodactyl or doing it with like a speed boosted Scolipede or a Scarfer. So I need to make sure I have some form of defensive response to those Pokemon in particular, or at least some sort of good check to those Pokemon, whether it be offensive or defensive. I need to have at least a couple ways to deal with all three of those Pokemon, because more likely than not, he's going to bring at least two of those three. If I had to guess, it's going to be the Shaman Sky and the Greninja. I don't think Zeraora has the best matchup against my team, but with the right coverage options against the specific 6 Pokemon that I end up bringing, it could still be a bit of a threat against me for sure. So I have to at least be ready for Zeraora, even though I don't think it's the most likely bring. Shaman Sky, though, is something I really have to have my eye on in particular, as if I recall correctly, he actually won his game last week against Goldoa with pretty much a last turn flinch with a Scarf Air Slash. So I have to be really careful around that. I had a lot of trouble with flinching in my game against Nexus last week, so need to make sure I have some ways to kind of play around that, just to maximize my odds of not losing to something like that. Serene Grace Air Slash from a Shaman Sky is pretty terrifying considering its speed tier, its offensive stat, its special attack stat, and yeah, just the fact that Air Slash flinches 60% of the time. That's really ridiculous. So it's just something I have to be kind of careful about as I build for this matchup and as I kind of game plan for how I want to approach this. But in terms of some of the bigger threats on his team as well, just including the Shaman Sky and really the Ash Greninja as well, like those are obvious. Those are his Ubers on his team. The Latias is actually kind of annoying as well, as it is one of his Z captains. And like I kind of talked about when I was building for Randy in week 2 of this season, Latias has access to a very annoying move called Reflect Type. And while I don't necessarily think he's going to bring Reflect Type, just because I showed that I'm willing to prep for it really, heavily, especially when I played against Randy, I think it's still a possible bring, and it's quite literally the best possible bring he can have against a team that has a Magearna on it, as he can just trace or copy over my Steel Fairy typing and still have access to Levitate, leaving him only one weakness. It's just a really good option for him to bring. So I'm still going to prepare pretty heavily for that, just in case that's what he decides to bring here in this matchup. And no matter what, it's going to be a really big threat because I have to play so carefully around that. But even just something as simple as like a Z Energy Ball or a Z Thunderbolt, Latias Latias with Calm Mind and some coverage moves could be really annoying for my team as well. Just because it's going to be able to check stuff like my Manaphy, maybe even my Mew really easily too. And you know, that speed tier, the base 110, is not super easy for my team to deal with either. So the Z Latias, I think, should come in this matchup. I think it's one of the bigger threats against my team. Really, if I were Tup, I would treat this matchup very offensively against my Mons. He does have some speed tiers that work out well against me, and as long as he has sufficient checks to my potential Scarfers and Mega Aerodactyl, then you know, he could be in a pretty good spot. So when I'm building this team, I'm kind of preparing with that type of strategy in mind here, so hopefully I'll be able to combat that as best as possible. The other Mon that's kind of a big threat to me if I give it free turns is the Mega Scizor. You know, it only has the one weakness in fire. Granted, it's a 4x weakness, and I can really abuse that with the vast majority of my team. It's still a massive threat. If it's able to get a +2 and something like my Groudon or Manaphy are weakened into range of a Bullet Punch, then or even outsped by it in the case of Groudon potentially, that's something that could definitely be a problem for my team to deal with. So I have to both play really carefully around the Mega Scizor just to make sure, you know, it's not going to straight up beat me, and I also just have to, you know, prep carefully around it too. It doesn't necessarily mean I need to bring fire coverage on every Mon, even though that's honestly what I often end up doing against Mega Scizors because I just hate dealing with them. They're really annoying, but you know, I just have to be really careful around it. So that's something I'll be keeping in mind with my team building as well. I'm going to show you this in a second, but I'm going to bring the Groudon, and it's going to end up being pretty much dedicated toward dealing with the Mega Scizor just to make sure that I don't lose to it. And Groudon is a pretty good way of being able to do that as well. So a little bit more in terms of what I'm going to try to do to win this game. So the other thing too, just because his best Mons are really fast against my team and more often than not kind of frail. I know Latias and Mega Scizor aren't particularly frail, but I do kind of expect at least more offensive investments, or I at least expect being able to weaken them down relatively well with the members of my team. I think his team is pretty weak to speed control, so if I can control speed in this game, or at least control momentum with some speedy threats of my own, I think I'll be in a pretty good spot in this matchup. So stuff like the Shaman Sky Greninja and the Zeraora, I need to make sure I have at least 2 ways to be able to outspeed those. Unfortunately, I only have one Mon that naturally can do that, so that's going to involve having a Scarfer in this matchup too, just to make sure that I'm okay against those Mons. So it's going to come down to kind of determining what the best Scarfer is for me in this matchup, and I'll show you what I decide to go with here in just a second. But the only other thing I wanted to point out too, I guess on the topic of momentum, so his electric immunities, he has 3 of them, which is kind of surprising. He has the Diggersby, he has the Claydol, he has the Zeraora. I actually don't expect any of those to come, which could make something like Volt Switch spam from Magearna be really useful in this matchup too. And then the only other thing, he only has 2 Stealth Rockers, neither of which are particularly great in this matchup, either the Claydol and the Miltank. I think he probably brings the Miltank. He's brought it in all 3 of his previous games, I believe, so I think he'll most likely continue that trend, as that's a relatively reliable Stealth Rocker, definitely more so than the Claydol would be. But even so, that's just something I need to keep in mind. Miltank is pretty fat and pretty annoying. He loves to spam like paralysis with it, so I'll just have to be careful around that too. So with all that said, let's go ahead and hop on over to the builder real quick, or the team for this week against Tup. And kicking this off, I'm going to bring a Choice Scarf to Goodra. Now this is going to be my win con, my primary win con in this game, and that's simply because it outspeeds his entire team and hits his entire team very hard with one of my coverage moves. This will outspeed the, I believe it's max speed Zeraora. Yeah, I think this is max speed Zeraora, which is nice. So now I'll have 2 Mons that are able to do that between my Mega Aerodactyl and my Scarf Goodra. Again, Draco Meteor, Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, Ice Beam hits his entire team super hard. I just need to be careful about not giving his threats free setup opportunities based upon what I decide to lock into with this Goodra. More likely than not, this is just going to be kind of a late game revenge killer or late game win condition in this game, instead of bringing it out repeatedly in the early game to try to check stuff. I don't really want other Mons to be able to have setup opportunities against me, so This is just nice for specifically for the late game, but also having Sap Sipper is really nice too. On the off chance that he opts to bring like a Scarf Shaman Sky again, I can maybe take advantage of him locking into a Seed Flare against my team, as I do have the Sap Sipper ability on this, or even just a regular Shaman Sky. This is a very safe switch into Shaman Sky. There's nothing he can knock me out in one hit with, and I even block the potential Leech Seed with Sap Sipper, so that's really cool too. So this is definitely something I can pivot in if I need to against his team, and especially it's going to be really good against him in the late game. So that is the Goodra for this week. Really solid in this matchup, no doubt. Going to try to build the team around breaking his team down into range of this Goodra in the late game, which most likely just means getting rid of all of his slightly bulkier and fatter threats, or just Pokemon, not necessarily threats, against my team. Just getting rid of some of the bulkier, fatter Pokemon in the early and mid game, which will hopefully just leave him with stuff like his Greninja and Shaman Sky in the late game that he would more likely than not be trying to win with offensively late games. So yeah, those would basically both be handled by Goodra, and that's kind of the ideal game plan that I'm shooting for here in this matchup. So next up is the Magearna. This is going to be my other way to help me keep the Shaman Sky and the Greninja in check. The combination of the Goodra and the Magearna are both really good at doing that. Shout out to Baby Eric for the advice on this set. This was a really good idea for this matchup. So this is a very straightforward set, honestly. It's basically spamming Volt Switch and then hitting him up with a powerful Fluid Cannon or Hidden Power Fire as needed. Hidden Power Fire specifically for the Shaman if it happens to be behind a sub, but more specifically for the Mega Scizor. Fluid Cannon just really nice and spammable against this team. More often than not, I'm just going to be clicking Volt Switch though, because Volt Switch with my special attack investment should break the sub of the most likely Shaman set that he could bring, speed creeps and all, even if he's like a sub-seed Shaman, unless he's like max HP, which is possible, I just think it's unlikely. Then I should be able to break its sub with a Volt Switch and basically shrug off a Leech Seed if he tries to Leech Seed stall my Magearna. And regardless, I should be able to do 25% to this to the Shaman each time I Volt Switch, which means it's going to have one less switch into Stealth Rock, which could be really nice too in this game, as I feel like I can pressure his defoggers really well as well once I get my rocks up. So that combination is really nice. Protect allows me to have a better chance of surviving hits, multiple hits in a row from something like a Specs Greninja or even like a Life Orb Greninja, just to help ensure that it's more of a struggle for him to get his Battle Bond up in this game, as he does have to get a kill for his Battle Bond to activate, so that helps me out with that. This also helps out against the potential for Shaman spamming Scarfed or Life Orb or any like leftovers, whatever. It helps out against Shaman trying to spam Air Slash against my team, as with the leftovers and the Protect, it's going to take a lot of Air Slash flinches for him to be able to flinch down my Magearna, no matter what amount of health I'm at, as with all this investment, Air Slash is simply not going to be doing much damage against me whatsoever. So it's kind of a safeguard against that, but overall this is just meant to help me pivot around his scarier offensive threats, possibly Volt Switch on something like his Entei that could come, Volt Switch on the Mega Scizor, pretty much Volt Switch on any of those fatter Pokemon, maybe even the Melodic, that would try to switch into my Magearna and get some nice offensive pressure out against any of those three Pokemon as well. So just a really good supporting member of the team for this week, and yeah, I'm sure it's going to put in a lot of work here. Just matches up so well here with this set in my opinion. Now next up is the Manaphy. This is one of my win conditions as well, probably my secondary win condition in this matchup behind the Goodra. This just beats his team in terms of coverage. So Scald, Ice Beam, Energy Ball hits absolutely everything for at least neutral damage. It hits most of his team for super effective damage actually, which is pretty fun too. Tail Glow, obviously the free +3 leftovers and a lot of HP investment on this just to take hits as well as possible from his team. This is one of my better responses to the Entei that I think probably comes to help him deal with my Magearna. I think that's one of the mons he most likely brings, even though I don't really think Entei matches up super well against the rest of my team. It does on paper seem pretty important against my Magearna in terms of stopping like a setup variant, so I can easily see that being the case. This helps me deal with that. It also helps me take advantage of something like his Melodic, Is it melodic or melodic? I don't even know. Anyways, it helps me take advantage of something like the melodic. Even if he's running something like Haze or something like Mirror Coat, I can easily scout for those options and kind of play around that accordingly and really just dent his team. His best check to this is going to be his Latias, and if Latias is going to be his check to this, it has to be a Z Thunderbolt variant, which I actually have enough investment to survive a Z Thunderbolt from the Latias from full health. So if that comes into play, we'll be able to take that hit. Ideally, I'll be able to then knock him out with an Ice Beam, getting rid of one of the biggest threats against my team in Latias. So hopefully that's how that situation works out. If not, then that'll kind of suck, as Manaphy is really important. I don't want to get like critical hit, or maybe he'll be like Z Thunder or something and knock me out. That'd be really unfortunate too. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, I guess. But anyway, just a really good Pokemon against his team. It's fat, it's strong, it puts on a lot of pressure. That's about all I can really ask for in this matchup. Then I have the Groudon. Pretty straightforward set. This is a very similar set to what I brought against the Mega Latias in my matchup against Randy. This helps me deal with the possible Reflect type Mega Latias, even if it happens to get a Reflect type off against my Magearna. This does actually have the Fire Punch, so I can hit that Pokemon super effectively. Fire Punch is also really nice for the Mega Scizor as well. Swords Dance plus coverage moves on Groudon, as we've shown specifically last week against Nexus, just hits so hard. There's really very limited switch-ins to something like this, melodic or melodic, even with a Flame Orb, given its Marvel scale, isn't going to appreciate a +2 Precipice Blades. Nothing appreciates a +2 anything from Groudon, so Swords Dance is just an obvious call in my opinion, being able to hit his team so hard, break through those fatter Pokemon that some of the other Pokemon on my team might not be able to deal with as effectively. So again, overall, pretty straightforward set. Toxic allows me to potentially deal with the Latias if I need to, basically ensures that I'm not setup fodder against that, and also gives me an opportunity to potentially Toxic the Melodic, as I'd much rather that thing be Toxic than burned in this matchup due to the extra recoil, or the extra residual damage rather. So then I have the Mega Aerodactyl, again a very straightforward set. I have Speed for Zeraora, I have Taunt to prevent him from having any setup opportunities, or potentially prevent something like the Miltank from just coming in against me for free and getting off like a Thunder Wave or Stealth Rock or something like that, or even prevent a Milk Drink, and then I can just Toxic that thing right away as well. So this also can Toxic the Melodic. Those are the two main targets of Toxic that I'm expecting in this matchup. Maybe even Diggersby if he brings that. I really don't think that comes, but if it does, Mega Aerodactyl is my only resist to both of his stabs, so being able to at least hit that up with a Toxic, maybe even with a couple Rock Slides as well to kind of chip that down, that might be useful here in this matchup too. Other Pokemon on my team can certainly deal with the Diggersby as well, including my Goodra, which outspeeds it, but regardless, it's still nice to have some form of way to hit the Diggersby, obviously, with my one Pokemon that resists its dual stabs. But otherwise, pretty straightforward set. It's my Stealth Rocker in this matchup, probably my dedicated lead as well if he brings the Miltank especially. I think if he doesn't bring the Miltank and doesn't bring like any ground types, I might lead off with the Magearna instead, just for the free Volt Switch, the free slow momentum into whatever offensive Pokemon I want to have out. But a lot will just depend on what he actually decides to bring here in this matchup. But otherwise, pretty straightforward Aerodactyl set. And then we have finally the Mew. This is, I guess, another secondary win con. I'm not sure which one's really a better win con than comparing this to Manaphy. It kind of just depends on what he brings, obviously. But especially if he brings the Mega Scizor, that is my setup fodder. As you can see, this is an Adamant Flame Charge Mew with a Z Wild Charge to hit the Melodic as hard as possible. And then also having stuff like Leech Life and the Superpower. All these coverage moves are just so good against his team. It blows back the Melodic, even through the Marvel scale if he has that. It doesn't knock it out in one hit, don't get me wrong, but it does do a lot of damage, at least to the point where another Wild Charge should knock him out, or to the point where anything else on my team should be able to knock him out as well. And if I get the Flame Charge up, it does outspeed all of his biggest threats that aren't Choice Scarf. This thing is just really, really strong against him as a kind of unexpected win condition. I really don't expect him to anticipate a set like this, so this really could just come in handy for that, for that purpose as well. So that is the Mew for this matchup. That is the team for this matchup. Make sure to let me know what you think about the team in the comments below. I feel pretty confident about this team going in. realistically, I think this is a pretty good matchup for me too, just in terms of having good checks to all of his mons. But, you know, Tup has 2 Pokemon with the ability Serene Grace, so anything can happen, as you guys know. Serene Grace is a devastating ability at times, and I've definitely been on the losing end of Serene Grace shenanigans multiple times in the past, so I have to be really careful around that. If I can play around that, though, I think the team I'm bringing for this week should be able to carry me through. But again, let me know what you think about that in the comments below. Make sure to be on the lookout for the battle coming out tomorrow. No clue what time that's going to be coming up yet, but I imagine it'll be sometime in the afternoon EST, so be on the lookout for that. Again, make sure to check out Tup's side as well when that comes up, as well as Dan's battle that'll be coming up tomorrow as well. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you all tomorrow. Peace.